Hello, 2026, and hello to a new round of interviews here on the Simple Pin podcast. We are going into year 10 of recording episodes all about Pinterest, and there's no better way to kick this off with an interview with Pinterest itself. But it's more rather herself. Sydney Stanbeck, who is the head of global research and content at Pinterest, is going to join me to talk about Pinterest Predicts 2026. I am so excited about this interview and excited to share it with you because we didn't want to do the typical, I would call it a corporate-y interview, but something that's more behind the scenes. The heart of why Pinterest actually has this report, what went into it, the hours they spent combing over the data, where the data came from, and what Sydney's favorite prediction is, and what are some ones in the past that maybe she thought would come true and they didn't. And we'll end it with how business owners can use this report to really get creative, not just for your Pinterest marketing, but for your marketing overall. I really hope you enjoy this interview with Sydney. I loved that it was a little more casual. We had a lot of great conversation about her team and about how they basically spend an entire year planning for releasing this report and how much time, labor, data, love her and her team put into this. I'd love to hear from you after this interview is done. What is your favorite prediction that Pinterest has put out for 2026? I know that Sydney shares her favorite and I share mine. So I would love to hear from you. What is your favorite after we're done? If you want the link to Pinterest Predicts, it's down below in the description. Just go ahead and click on that and scroll through. I will also talk in a new short podcast interview that's going to come next week right after this as to how to use this report. But until then, here is my interview with Sydney Stanbeck. Sydney, welcome to the Simple Pin podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited. So before we dive into Pinterest Predicts, I would love to know about your current role at Pinterest.
Yeah. My full name is Sydney Stanback. And I am the Trends and Insights lead at Pinterest. That entails a lot of different things, but mainly being the Insights lead for our annual Pinterest Predicts report, which has been out for 6 years, and I've actually worked on it since we launched it back in 2020. I've seen it all.
Yeah, you have.
But I mean, I love my job. And what I really love about my job is that I get to sit at the intersection of like cultural curiosity and creativity. I am a bit of a pop culture fan. When I first came to Pinterest and was able to work on this project, it was like a dream research job, right? You know, I get to interpret signals from our 500 million users, seeing what they're searching, saving, and shopping for, or what their dreams are, what they're manifesting, and also see how they're bringing it to life. And it really helps us, better understand what's coming next. I have a really cool job. I feel I feel lucky as a researcher by practice that I get to work on something like this.
Absolutely. So talk about like 6 years too, how you have the full window from concept to launch and launching every year. What were some of the initial ideas around why lean into this project? Why even do something this flagship for Pinterest? And tell me a little bit about that beginning kind of brainstorming process behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we kicked off Predicts back in 2020, so I can't believe that's been 6 years. I think the vision was pretty unique at the time. There are a lot of wrapped reports that come out at the end of the year that are really reflective of the past year. And I think those are incredibly valuable. It's always nice to reflect on the previous year, but I think what we, felt where we could add value was, instead of reporting on what's already been viral, we really wanted to serve as a bit of a crystal ball and surfacing trends that we believe are not yet trending yet. Pinterest Predicts was really born from our mission to help people plan for a future that reflects their truest selves, and it gives brands, creators, and small businesses really a head start into where consumers' hearts and minds are heading next.
That's a lot of pressure actually to put on a team to come up with the not yet trending, because even as we've seen over this last year, you see trends kind of insert themselves really quickly. So this not yet trending idea, how do you all even begin the process of trying to have the crystal ball, right? Like, I mean, is everything thrown on the table? Tell me a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, I mean, I like to joke that it's a 365-day of the year process for my team. Like I'm always thinking to the year ahead. It's a joke, but it's also a little bit true. I mean, we work on this for a very long time. I would say like we really start in the middle of the summer. And it takes a lot. But I think really what gives it its magic is that our process goes like beyond just tracking growth in search, right? We use a machine learning badge powered methodology that analyzes everything from search patterns on Pinterest, but also like visual search cues. So the colors, materials, and aesthetics that people are really drawn to. And it gives us a full spectrum of what people are really saving and dreaming about. Of course, data is integral to this entire process, but it's not just data. I think my favorite element of this is the human insight. One of my favorite aspects of this process is every year for the past, I think even since Pinterest Breaks 2021, we've done this brainstorming event called Insights Making Week. And it's where a team of cross-functional strategists across Pinterest come together, have like a 3-day brainstorm where we really get into the data and like discuss what we're observing. And because there's so much to work with, right? It's great to bring a team of cross-functional people together to have like a very honest conversation about what's emerging in the data and what we ultimately want to include in the report. Obviously, the curation goes well beyond that. That's happens usually in August. We're really, continuing to refine these trends for the months following. But the human curation aspect of it is just incredible. And I think it's what also helps it resonate. I think we really try to bring in a lot of different perspectives into the room to ensure that when anyone picks up this report, anyone anywhere can find something that's relevant to them. And so that is actually, it's just like I said, it's my favorite aspect of this entire process, the people coming together to really get into the data and see what's happening.
Yeah, I would imagine I'm envisioning it from an outsider perspective. So you tell me if this is right. I am just thinking like mountains of data, right?
Yes.
And then you have these people, like you said, with this human perspective of all the ways in which they're entering the world and bumping up against conversations in the world and having these conversations about, well, I think this is trending and I think this is trending. So this is an interesting question that I didn't include, but I think it's something that the human aspect of people bringing what they bring to the table. Is there people who are really tied to a prediction that like they really want it to be in there and it's like it just can't be? Are these part of the discussion?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think it happens. It's natural when you bring in diverse perspectives that there are things that people would want to or like really tied to that may not make it for a variety of different reasons, right?
Yeah.
But I love the discussion. I love why someone feels so passionate about something. Like I basically serve as a moderator in that room. I have my perspective on things, but and I lean in when I think it's very valuable, but like I want to hear what other people are thinking. Because that is the true insight and throughout this process. And so I think that one of the things I've learned in like navigating those conversations is that if someone feels attached to something, including myself, because I have felt attached to things that may or may not have made it into the report over the years, I got to dig into the reason why. I have to validate that sentiment to see if it exists outside of that room, but also if it exists within our first party data, right? Like we want to make sure that the trends that we go to market with will last and aren't flashes in the pan. So, we that's already ingrained into our methodology. But again, the human curation helps us navigate these kind of fads that are surfacing to make sure that it's not something that is a moment in time, that it's something that will endure. It's interesting because I think the debate about it is so rich. But one of the things that we did this year, which was net new, was we leveraged generative AI for the first time in this process. And we built what we called like a trend benchmark.
Okay.
Based off of all the learnings that we have had for Pinterest Predicts over the past 6 years, which made it incredibly powerful because we could see like what type of trends would resonate more with consumers versus advertisers, which ones are more buzzworthy, which ones are more globally relevant, right? That made that debate a little bit easier because it was a very unbiased take of like, yeah, like makes the most sense for the report. But even on top of that, of course, while this benchmark provided us with guidance, we made the final decisions of what ended up in the report, right? So if someone feels attached to something, there must be a reason why. And I like getting into that. And that actually helps us understand if it should or should not end up in the report.
Well, and I love that human aspect of it because I think it's very easy for people to look at a large company and just assume a lot about the process, whether it's you took, you have 21, which I imagine getting to even 21 is difficult, but looking and asking questions, why did they choose this? Why didn't they choose this? So, one really interesting aspect that I've always enjoyed about these reports is the part about what generation it's trending with, because we see Pinterest be very multi generational. I mean, my mom is 77, she uses it, and my daughter's 20, and I use it. So, it's like we have Gen Z, Gen X, and Boomer. And one of the really cool things that I loved is the throwback kid, which is one of the predictions. And you said boomers and Gen X are driving the trend. So tell me a little bit about how kind of that process is done, surfacing this generational data to be able to pinpoint whether or not it's Gen Z, Gen X, millennial, or boomer.
Yeah, so a couple things go into that. Well, primarily it's informed by first party data. So, when we're looking at the search terms or the engagement points for this report, we also take into consideration the generations driving it because we want this to be, again, a cross generational report. And interestingly enough, with Throwback Kid, to take it back to Insights Making Week, one of the ways that this week works is that everyone's kind of split up into different category rooms. So we have a room for like food, we have a room for parenting, and so on and so forth. And this, of course, came out of the parenting room. A lot of people in that room are, of course, parents. And so, which is necessary. But I think, even I wasn't in that room and I am not a parent. What I loved about that trend, it's actually one of my favorites, is that, we've seen a lot of conversations about thrifting over the past year. Like it's very relevant to Gen Z and millennials, but this trend is introducing it to older generations and they're also applying it to children's fashion, which I don't think people talk about in the context of thrifting, right? Yeah. And so I think that understanding how parents and grandparents are really blending a little bit of their own childhood nostalgia with modern play through thrifting vintage toys or, thrifting vintage clothing for their children or grandchildren. I think it's very much aligned with what people are talking about, of course, in the behavioral shifts towards the secondhand market, but also talking about how that's impacting categories outside of fashion. And so I think that it's nice to have, and the parents who were participating in that parents room were a blend of parents from a variety of different generations. So it's really interesting to see once the kind of trend is finalized, which generations are driving it from a data standpoint, but it's really, I find that, those are usually the initial generations when we like initially pull the data.
Yeah.
But as these trends grow, they scale and other generations adopt it. So like, even if let's say millennials and Gen Zers aren't adopting it initially, we know that those generations are also having children, right? Or starting to have children. So it'd be very interesting to see how they adopt it, right? Like, even as a millennial, seeing like 2000s being considered as vintage was just like, oh my gosh.
Totally. You're like, what? That was like 2 years ago.
Not that long ago. Please tell me that's not vintage. It's one of the ways another one of my favorite aspects of this report is seeing how it's adopted how a trend is adopted once the report is out. So
100%. Well, and I would say too, even as I see my daughter love thrifting, who's 18, and then my mom having clothes in her closet that she never got rid of and passing those down, or even toys or anything like that, there is this great marrying of what Gen Z is rising up and really looking for and asking for. And then the nostalgia that comes with still having some of those items or seeing some of those items and then passing them on. And so I do agree with you. Like this seems to be such a growing and strong trend. And it also kind of aligns environmentally too, where this not wanting to buy more, wanting to pass on or have good quality products. So that one really stood out to me as like, oh yeah, I could see this being a huge trend over 2026. So I loved it. Okay, what is, if you had to pick a favorite, which I know is hard, it's like picking a favorite child, what is your favorite prediction that I'll kind of put a spin on it. What's your favorite prediction that actually surprised you? That you were like, oh, okay. Or, I mean, I could ask a ton of questions about it, but we'll just go with that.
What surprised me? I'm going to say Cabbage Crush.
Oh, yes. I had that written down.
Yeah. I remember my reaction to it when I first saw it during Insights Making Week. And I was like, oh, okay. I did it.
Yes.
I did it, out of all the different things that could have come out of the food and beverage room, that wasn't something that I expected. But when I saw the data behind it, and there were so many search terms that qualified for that trend, I knew that there was something very rich and valuable there. And one of the lessons that I have learned throughout the years of being a part of this process is sometimes the more unexpected things are like, people just kind of gravitate towards. I mean, Pickle Fix was a trend from Pinterest Predicts 2025. And I remember when I was initially looking at that trend and saw Pickle Margarita, and I was like, that sounds very interesting. Yeah. I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. But that is so interesting because it's like a new way, a new flavor, a new way to experience eating a pickle, right? And so, seeing all the cabbage recipes that were coming up, and there were so many different types across so many different types of cuisines, right? And just being incorporated in unique ways. I was like, that was the one that surprised me the most, but it's also one of my favorites because of my initial reaction to it. I was just like, there, and in the room, like everyone in the room was like, wow, like that's not what we expected, but that is incredible. I still have people coming to me who participated that week and just said, I'm so happy that cabbage made it into the report. I was like, the moment I saw it, it was going to make it in there. So,
that's very fascinating. I know I saw that and I thought, okay, cabbage. But I think this leads to kind of my next question with how these predictions impact globally, because there are so many different cultures that do use cabbage in their cooking. There's several different varieties of cabbage. So how do you see these predictions kind of impacting the global market, especially as we see Pinterest growing really rapidly on the global stage, right? Like there's a lot of expanded countries that it's reaching into, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I think that's actually one of the reasons why we included cabbage, is because the diversity within it. There's not one way to eat cabbage. There are apparently 100 or thousands of ways to eat cabbage. And it being adopted differently across different countries, different cultures. And that's something we are very intentional about when we are pulling together this report. Global relevance is critical. We have national stakeholders who participate in this process because we want to ensure that these trends are relevant across the globe and they're going to be adopted across the globe, right? And so this report is based off of global data. So a data standpoint, there is always that like assurance that it's reaching a variety of different audiences across a variety of different regions. But again, in terms of ensuring adoption, like we do that from a data standpoint, but then also through like a human curation standpoint, right? And then the other thing to consider is trend adoption looks differently everywhere, right? So the way that Cabbage Crush could be adopted in the US is going to look different than how it's adopted in Korea or South Africa or the United Kingdom, right? And so when we're narrowing down like the final keywords for the report, we want to make sure that they're representative of adoption across a variety of different countries. But even when we're monitoring how these trends grow throughout the year, we take into consideration like all the different ways they could be adopted across the globe, right? So, but global relevance is so critical to the success of this program. It's another one of I was like, everything about this is my favorite. But I learn a lot throughout that process of ensuring global relevancy. I'm obviously based in the United States, and hearing from my non-US colleagues about what works for their regions and what doesn't, it just makes me a stronger researcher, and it just, of course, makes the program a lot stronger too.
Yeah. Before we go into like how small businesses or advertisers could adopt this, looking back at the past, can you identify one or two predictions that you really thought would take off that maybe didn't pick up? That you were surprised, like, man, I really thought that would like just skyrocket and it didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think our success rate makes it really challenging from one
Yes.
side. One that comes to mind is from Predicts 2025, and it was called Chaos Cakes. It actually had my favorite search term in the report of the year, which was called rat cake. Again,
Mhm.
that really just took me by surprise. It wasn't that it wasn't adopted, but it wasn't adopted in the way that I think we originally forecasted. I think we've seen a lot of different baking trends over the past couple of years. I think the genesis of this trend was like, okay, this is just like there's no rules, right? This is
Mhm.
anti-Pinterest perfect. Like you're really just creating a cake for like in any way, shape, or form. And I think people were doing that to a certain degree. But as I saw that trend evolve throughout the year, it became a little bit more meaningful. Like there's like these new like thankful cakes or like I don't know if you've seen them, but like it's like
Mhm.
I think it's just people are exhibiting how do I say this? Their persona via baking.
Ah, okay.
Maybe it's not as chaotic as we thought it
Mhm.
would be. But and it
Mm.
was adopted, but I think it just evolved in a way that didn't align with the original kind of vision for that tribe. But
Right.
yeah.
I would imagine too, it would be you all are working so hard to kind of identify a theme, and then
Mhm.
you have the keywords with the data, but then that can take on a different life of its own, right? Or
Exactly.
it can be picked up differently. I'm thinking even currently when we're recording this in the holiday season, you see Ralph Lauren Christmas kind of taking off, but you can see a lot of stores maybe weren't prepared for that movement to happen.
Mhm.
But all of a sudden, everyone's like, get as much Ralph Lauren or plaid to the front as we can. And I think that's the difficulty any team has in predicting. But I think there's a good success rate, right? Have you guys tracked that
Yeah, I
over
mean,
the years?
yes, over the past 6 years, 88% of the trends that we have called have come true, which is
Okay.
pretty
Pretty good.
remarkable. And again, that comes from our methodology. It's very rigorous, but I think it also comes from the way that people use Pinterest. I think like take it back to like why we decided to have a predictive report versus like a reflective report is because the use case of Pinterest is so future forward,
Yeah.
right? It's very intentional. And so I think that gives us the credibility to say these things because of the way that people use our platform.
Yeah. Very true. I'm picturing in my head this way of a Pinterest user adopting it in the future of kind of picking your prediction at the
Mhm,
beginning of the year and,
mhm,
like, kinda holding to it to see, "Okay, is that gonna come true? Is that gonna be manifested?" And
mhm,
then, like, a benchmark at the end of the year, like, did it come true? Did it kind of
mhm,
this fun interactive piece where my brain went. Okay, so picture I'm holding papers, right? Let's say
yes.
this is like Pinterest predicts. I've printed off the report because, I'm Gen X. I love paper still.
I love paper too, and
Oh,
I'm
there you go. Okay,
yeah,
it's strong in
so
us.
strong, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so as you or your team are building this report and they are envisioning the small business, the advertiser using it, where do you go to like workflow? How do you envision them taking these predictions and folding it into their marketing, especially if Pinterest is so forward for them, if it is very much a platform that drives a lot of traffic for them? What did you envision as you thought about the business owner and their marketing as it pertained to Pinterest?
They're definitely top of mind as we're pulling together this report. I mean, one of the reasons why we have 21 different trends is because there are 21 different, what that gives advertisers 21 different ways to reach their target audience, right? We don't expect every advertiser to act on all 21 trends. That actually I would probably recommend against that.
Yes.
But I do think that it really serves as a spark of inspiration. Like and we've seen these trends be adopted by brands in a variety of different ways. We've seen brands, of course, lean into them on Pinterest. We offer trend packages to brands to invest in these trends on Pinterest. And then, we've seen brands adopted into their product roadmap, into their creative messaging. I've heard a lot of feedback from creatives over the past couple of years saying that this is like, they love this report because it's such a creative sandbox for them to see, like, this is what consumers are leaning into. So visually, and from a message standpoint, these are the things that they're going to care about in the year ahead. So I think there's so many ways to tap into the trends from predicts. I would say that, you know, it's meant to really serve as a spark of inspiration, not to be, not to use our own puns, but it is supposed to be a spark of inspiration for brands to feel confident that if they chose to lean into a trend that they felt was relevant to their audience, that they could see some success in that.
Well, and also I think with marketing right now, some people are naturally like super creative. It just kind of comes to them. But for some other people, they are like content dry. They're struggling with ideas. And what I like to tell people who are in our community is think of this. I love that term that you use, like sandbox. Think of it as a creative starter for you, that if you don't know how you're going to lean into your marketing in the next year, this just doesn't have to be Pinterest exclusive, but it can be all of the platforms that you might use to get people towards your products or your content. And if you're struggling with ideas here, it's like Pinterest is literally serving up on a silver platter. Here's predictions and here's some roadmaps you can go down. And I like that you said, don't go down all 21, pick a few and then lean into it from there.
Yes, and I think that you brought up a great point in terms of like engagement with this trend, both on and off Pinterest. I mean, one of my favorite parts of this report is seeing how these trends come to life, again, both on Pinterest, but also off Pinterest, like just within the zeitgeist, right? And so I think that just adds credibility to the report. But again, it's a rich opportunity for brands to just figure out, to have a window into what's going to be relevant in the year ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you all start like in the summer.
Yes.
So what do you do from January to June as it pertains to the? I'm sure you do a lot. That was not at all like you don't.
No, but
yeah, the predictions like realm. Do you all kind of touch base with each other? Like, ooh, this is trending. This is taking off. Like, how's that work in the, I guess, assessment time?
Well, the first half of the year is usually just planning for the next year, right?
Okay.
So if the execution starts in the summer, the planning starts in the like winter and spring. My team at that time is doing a lot of like R&D on our methodology to see what ways that we can advance it in for the following year's report. We're considering other inputs that we want to incorporate into the report that we think would be valuable. That is actually how this new research that we commissioned came to life, because we really wanted to get a good understanding of how people were feeling heading into 2026.
Yeah.
We're very excellent at capturing, what is about to trend, and we wanted to get to the bottom of why it is trending, right? And so that's like an example of something that comes out at the beginning of the year, because we, given the timing of how this trend report comes together, we have to move pretty fast and furiously in the second half. And so, so it's a lot of planning.
Yeah.
A lot
You
of
don't get much of a break.
stage. No. I think we're probably going to start talking about Pinterest Predicts 2027 in January. So,
Yes.
again, I've worked on this for 6 years. It's grown significantly. I think that as a researcher, it's such a privilege to work on something like this and to leverage research in this way. I've never experienced that in my over a decade plus career in research. And so being able to spend most of my year on this is incredible.
And what a gift it is to be able to have these 6 years of experience that each
Yeah.
time you do this, you get better at it and your team can go back and say, "We wouldn't do this again. We would do this again," about our methodology. So, there's so many things that people do that have a shorter span of time that you don't get that, like, what worked, what didn't work, what would we add in again, taking that rubric and benchmarking it against that. And maybe that's where we'll kind of land the plane on this is
Mhm.
how do you process this? Like there's launch time, there's all the buzz, there's all of that. Is there this middle ground where you give yourselves this assessment time to say, this is what worked well, this didn't work well? We would use this, we would commission this same company again and rinse and repeat, or we're going to add a new layer into it. What does that look like for you all?
Yeah, I think reflection of this process is critical to its success. That's one of the reasons why we, have our, what we call it, like our we called it rate, which is the 88%, because we want to see what worked and what didn't with our trends. And beyond just the trends themselves, the process and what goes into it, reflection is critical for us to progress and continue to grow this program and the impact that it has on businesses, but also consumers, right? And so I would say it's very critical. It's an interesting process because I think Predicts is a full year report, right? We're
Yeah.
still seeing conversations about Predicts 2025 in like the top of Q4 of this year, which is incredible. I love it. It's amazing. I think it's so important for us to take a step back and look at the entire process to see what worked and what didn't so we can continue to grow this program because it's so valuable and it's also a lot of fun. We use this program in a lot of different ways. I've seen, one of the ways that I've seen us use it over the past couple of years that I've loved. We've used it internally at Pinterest. We use it for our company morale. It's something that people who touch it and who don't touch it are very passionate about. And so we want to continue to get it right. We wanted to continue to grow and be this temple moment that we all look forward to every year. So,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I envision pickle margaritas at like the company party.
There were a lot of pickle margaritas or pickle cocktails at the holiday party last year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That is
always fun.
so great. Sydney, thank you so much for sharing your insight to building the Pinterest Predicts and just your excitement around it. Again, I think it's one of those things where we can see as businesses the report and all of the predictions and all of the glitz and the glam and how fun it looks, but that there is you and your team working hard year round to really bring this to life and in not just bringing a report, but bringing a report that has that 88% success rate that you really want consumers and businesses to leverage in a really helpful way. And I just think that has been such a joy to talk to you and just to get my little sliver of just what that's looked like and then your excitement for it as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a fun conversation.
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed it. So, cheers to 2026 predictions and let's wait and see. Maybe we'll do a benchmark podcast in December of 26 to see which ones actually really came to fruition.
I love that. We should absolutely do that.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sydney.
Thank you.